Good morning, everybody. Internet people and real life people. Hello. Here we go. Got to keep the coffee nearby. I'm out of practice with the school schedule. I used to work at a school and have not been on that schedule in a while. So this morning was a nice reminder. Well, it's good to see y'all. And I know we're going to talk partially to the camera and then also to y'all in the room. And I have a little bit of content prepared, and then I also wanted to leave it open for plenty of Q&A because I know the topic is childhood anxiety, which we could talk about for a week and still have more to talk about. And especially here at Veritas, there's a wide age range of the K through 8th, right? So some of those things can look different, but my hope is today, for at least y'all parents, I can give y'all some ways to think about it, some ideas of things, potential resources that can be helpful, and then just be available for questions. So currently, just so y'all know a little bit more about me, yeah, I've been a counselor for 15 years, worked at several different settings. I've been in a school, I've been in a nonprofit, worked with ages 5 all the way through adulthood. Currently now, my practice focuses more on adults 18 and older, so young adults and adults. I do a lot of trauma work, working with anxiety and panic attacks, depression, and then navigating big life transitions. So I've got a few of my cards up here. So at the end, any of y'all in person can grab one. I can also leave one with Kim so that anyone else, if you want my contact info, whether it's for me or just to get some recommendation of other resources that feel like a good fit for y'all or your kids, we can do that. So this morning, I wanted to first talk a little bit about just how to think about anxiety and just kind of conceptualize it, because sometimes I find some people talk about it as, oh, I feel really stressed or I feel really overwhelmed. And sometimes that is what we call anxiety. But sometimes for some people, their system just idles kind of high, right? Like you just kind of skew more anxious, or you might notice one of your kids is kind of like that, or you might notice after something really challenging or difficult happens or a big transition happens, you might notice some of that anxiety piece come up too, right? So it can show up for different reasons. And so I first kind of want to talk about that. And then another big piece that I'm going to talk about today too is our nervous system. And just so y'all know, our emotions are part of our nervous system. They're not just random things that float around and happen inside of us. It's actually part of a nervous system response. So just like I hear a loud sound and I kind of jump or startle, my emotions are part of that nervous system response, and it's running all the time, right? So, and if you think about it, emotions have a different emotions have a different physical, visceral experience, right? Like angry is a very different body experience than sad or joyful, right? Some of them might feel similar. Excited can sometimes feel similar to anxious or nervous, right? But they have a slightly different feel. And so starting to build some of that mind-body awareness and connection is one of the tools that can be really helpful, whether it's for you as parents, for your kids. So we're gonna go into that a little bit. So with anxiety, right, I think a lot of us think about it's like worry, it can be stress, it's kind of like we're moving fast, right? Like the speed of our system is going faster. We might think about depression, something like that is more like our system is going too slow. It's like flat, more disconnected. It's harder to feel that connection. And I'm going to draw, you'll get to see my drawing skills in a second. But with anxiety, right, sometimes it can be genetic, right? Like sometimes you might see anxiety runs in families. And so sometimes it can be quite literally and simply just biologically, brain chemicals, the things you need for serotonin and different things like that, that just help your system feel settled, just aren't quite in balance. And so sometimes medication can be a helpful thing, right? Sometimes with anxiety, it's maybe something traumatic or stressful happened. Maybe we're navigating a transition. There's some very specific external thing going on that is contributing to this anxiety showing up. And then sometimes it can be things like beliefs we have about ourselves, or beliefs or worries we have about other people. Like, oh, I don't know, am I okay if, I'm holding myself to these certain standards, right? Or feeling like I'm only okay if I cross all my T's and dot all my I's and all this other kind of stuff, right? So sometimes it can also be beliefs and ways that we learn to see the world, see ourselves, make sure we're okay, and try to keep our okayness together, right? So there can be a lot of different sources from things. But I think one of my favorite go-to ways to really conceptualize anxiety is through this nervous system lens, okay? So I think I need to do the little hand wave to get the camera to follow me. There it goes. Okay, I think it's following me now. All right. If you see me oddly waving towards the little camera thing, that's what it is, okay? So, right, in between this window, this is our window of presence. This is our ability to be, that's when we are the most regulated and grounded and present. Okay. And so when we are in this window, when our system is kind of oscillating in this window, that is when we are most able to be present, connected, engaged. That's when our mind is thinking the most clearly. That's when our creative thinking skills, our ability to be connected, all of that stuff is kind of firing on all cylinders, right? And we can have varying levels of action and things like that happening, right? Like maybe we're navigating something that maybe it's not pleasant. Not every time we're present is a thing that's enjoyable, but it could be it's not stressful or overwhelming, right? It's like, hey, I know exactly how to handle this. This isn't my favorite thing, but I know exactly what to do. I feel equipped in this. I know the steps to take, right? But it can also be very enjoyable things. Maybe I'm relaxed and connecting with a friend, right? Or I'm playing, or I'm connecting with my kids, or we're having a nice moment of like, we're all just kind of here and we're doing this thing. My mind's not wandering off about 100,000 things, or I'm feeling really overwhelmed and shut down, right? So when we're in here, that is our best workable range for learning, for creating, for being present, all of that sort of stuff. Same with in school, when kids are in this window here of being able to be present, engaged, connected, that's when they're going to learn most effectively, right? Like that's why you hear a lot of studies and things like that of like when kids have support at home or they regularly have meals and all these other things, right? They're able to learn well. And if there's a lot of really stressful transitions or stressful things happening, their ability to learn and be present in class diminishes. That's because of this, right? Like the more stressful things, traumatic things. And it doesn't mean sometimes this stuff happens. You can be doing the absolute best possible job as a parent, and you still can't control for all the factors in life, right? Like parents still may go through a divorce. There still might be a stressful or traumatic thing that happens, right? Or there could be friendship struggles or different things like that that can contribute to some of this. But just knowing like if a kid is struggling to focus, struggling to be present and regulated in class, being curious about what might be going on that's making it where it's difficult for them to be present. Now, obviously, some kids have ADHD and different learning things that can impact that too. And so that'd be different. This would be like if something's suddenly different, right? Like maybe before your kid was able to focus and do well, and now suddenly it's feeling really different and they're really struggling or seeming really anxious or just having a really hard time connecting, okay? So when we're in this window, that's when we're the most present and we're the most regulated. So when people talk about being present or regulated, that's when we're here. That's when our system is connected. Again, there could be some ebb and flow within this window, but we're connected, okay? But sometimes something might happen and we come up out of this window. So this is when we're moving up and our system's starting to get faster. Once we get out of this window, that's when we're starting to creep into fight or flight and things in our body start to speed up, right? And so it can be just barely out the window, like, I'm here and I'm doing the thing, but I'm kind of having to work to be connected, right? And then sometimes it can be way up here. Again, this is a whole range, right? It could look like a panic attack. It could be a true survival thing, right? Those things you hear like, I'm escaping a tiger or something, right? And I suddenly could run a whole lot faster than I ever thought I could, right? Like that's why this energy is showing up. But with anxiety, it's like the alarm bells for a threat are going off at inaccurate times, right? Or because of some of those things, right? Like beliefs I have about myself, about what I need to do to be okay. I need to make all A's, That's the only way I can be okay, right? Or the only way to make sure my parents are happy, right? You never know what some of those beliefs are. Then some of this stuff, like I'm struggling in a class, right? Some of those different things can make a stress response show up. Even if, right, that beliefs are powerful, just like our sense of support and resources will also impact how quickly our system pops out of that window too, right? So that's why like transitions, especially if like parents are going through a divorce, something really stressful is happening in the rest of life, that makes our sense of resource and groundedness feel less stable. And so more things will feel like a threat more easily, right? Because some of those resources and supports are different or shifting or don't look the same, right? So when we're up here, this is more of that fight or flight energy. We're going faster, right? And then the other thing our nervous system can do is to drop down here. And this is more of that freeze or shutdown, right? Like, and we've all experienced both of these, right? Like a small version of this is, oh my gosh, I just looked at my schedule for the week and I can feel my whole body just like, like the thought of just like thinking about doing all of that, I can feel myself slump. That's a little bit of a freeze, right? Same with like someone being like, okay, fine, whatever, I'm done, right? That's also a freeze. That's kind of like, hey, okay, any more action on my part feels futile or feels like it might make it worse, or I'm officially overwhelmed and hit my capacity, so we're just dropping down in here. And we don't consciously choose these things, it's just what our system does, right? This is also where things that like depression can show up, right? So this is where our body goes slower, right? We get more disconnected. Up here, we're disconnected because we are going too fast and we're speeding up. It's like my thoughts are racing, my heart might be racing, like I'm really distracted, it's hard to settle. Down here, it's like I'm slowing down, I'm more disconnected, and I'm having to really work to have any sort of like tracking. It can be like a brain fog, it can be like I'm just shut down, right? And so things that are going to help on either end, and this is where the anxiety piece lives, are going to be things that help get us closer to presence. Okay. And so whether it's with yourself, whether it's with your kids, I really want to invite you to think about it like instead of calm, how can I calm down? How can I get them to calm down? Because a lot of times calm isn't being present. Calm is just pushing a lid down on the feelings and we're forcing them down, but we're not actually feeling settled or more present. It's just like, how can I just push them down and be fine? Right? Which isn't actually supporting any of it. So what we want to think about is what are things that start to build up a sense of being a little bit more present and connected. So a lot of times with like different things like this, you'll hear people talk about breathing or mindfulness or, oh, the thing froze. I need to do the hand motion. There we go. Okay. And sometimes those things can help, but actually what I like better than breathing techniques, and if breathing helps you or your kids, by all means, keep doing it. This isn't saying that's bad, but I know for a lot of people with anxiety, sometimes the breathing exercises feel more stressful or can feel uncomfortable. So with this, you want to think about things that support presence. One is gentle body movement, right? And it can be something as simple as like, even right now, maybe you're in your chair listening, just kind of like stretch a little bit. Whatever feels good. Could be kind of moving your shoulders around, rubbing your fingertips together, rotating your ankles a little bit. You might even feel yourself exhale some naturally, right? That's where it's like the breath shows up on its own when your body's ready, right? So like gentle body movement can be moving around in the chair, could be kind of rubbing your face a little bit, could be getting up and just walking around, stretching, right? But that is sending a different signal to our body of like, hey, we don't need to tense and prep to escape a tiger, right? Like when we're starting to get up here, we tend to tense. That's why like we're like, oh, I get a migraine when I'm stressed. My shoulders really hurt when I'm stressed. Like all these different things. It's because our body, without us even realizing it, is tensing and holding. Our shoulders might be higher, right? So sometimes even just a few of those moments is like, okay, gentle movement, get up and move around. Same with your kids, any age. This works. All of this stuff can be adapted to any age, right? Gentle movement, get up and move around, get your wiggles out, right? And it's like kind of letting your body do what it wants to do. right? We're not trying to force it to do anything. We're like, hey, what actually does what would kind of feel good in my body right now? Oh, this kind of feels good. Or, oh, I really want to get up and walk around. Noticing that, being curious about the signals from your system, and then honoring those as best you can and, within reason, right? So with kids, it's movement, getting up, wiggles. That's one reason recess is so helpful for kids with learning, right? Kids learn better when they've got recess and play because it's helping them get back here, right? So gentle body movement, that's a big one. Number 2 is noticing some sort of current moment body sensation. And it can be simple. It could be rubbing your fingertips together. One that I really love that I use myself, I have my adults clients use it, kids can do it, and is you take your pointer finger and your thumb and you rub them together. You can notice the difference, but then I want you to see how do you need to move them to actually feel the ridges of your fingerprints? And it's possible. And this is one, I'm holding my hands up so you can see them, but you could be in a meeting, you could be in class, you could be anywhere and do this, and it's a very subtle thing. And I like it because you're noticing a body sensation and it takes just enough concentration that it's bringing your mind closer to this being present window. And we're noticing just this, but it's also simple. It's not some complicated thing that you're trying to do when you're feeling stressed out or anxious. But again, it's a small invitation, right, to get yourself a little bit more present. The goal isn't calm. The goal is present. Okay. So anything, it could be noticing just the texture of your desk, right? You could notice where can I feel my body connected to the chair or any surface beneath me right now. So you just kind of scan the back of your body. Where do I feel the chair? Where do I feel the floor touching my foot? Right? These are subtle, small things. Again, you can do anywhere, right? But you're picking something. For younger kids, it might be, hey, here's like a texture on something, like notice that. Where can you feel it on your hands, right? Like, so it could be with a toy. You can do it with anything. A pen, right? You can also notice like body temperature, right? Like right now I can tell, hey, my arms feel a lot warmer because that's where my sweater is, and my hands feel a lot colder because they're not covered up by the sweater and it's a little colder outside this morning. Just noticing the body temperature contrast. Again, it's just an invitation to, because again, when we're up here, our mind is racing, our body's moving a lot faster. And the further up we're getting, the further away from right now we are. It's like, I'm sitting here in this meeting, but my whole mind is racing about, I got to do this thing today and then this thing, and my phone is buzzing because I'm thinking about that, right? It's like our mind is anywhere but here. So small invitations to move back towards this, right? And also, just a side note, as parents, the more you can support yourself in being regulated, the more that'll help your kids too, right? So it doesn't mean that it's all 100% on you or you have to be somehow magically regulated all the time. That's not possible. But our nervous systems pick up on what other people's nervous systems are doing. I mean, we all know, you walk in a room and you're like, ooh, what is going on in here? Like you didn't even hear anything, and you can walk in and you can feel it, right? But in the same way, it works in a positive way, right? Like if we're having a tough day, being around someone who's calmer and is settled helps our system settle, even if they don't say anything to us. We're just sharing space with them, right? So even for yourself, if you can support yourself in this, that will be a resource to your kids too, without you even having to actively do anything or tell them anything or whatever. Okay. So we've got gentle body movement. We've got noticing something current moment. It could be a body sensation. It can also be noticing something in the room. Sometimes noticing our own physical self feels too hard in a moment, or it could be, I'm feeling a lot of unpleasant stuff right now. I don't want to notice that, right? So it could be, hey, I'm going to look around the space, notice something in here. Let me see if my eyes can find something green. Okay, let me see if I can find something blue, right? Like again, just noticing your current moment. Anything that's helping you notice a current moment could be environmental or physical self, right? So gentle body movement, current moment, positive social connection is huge, right? I mentioned it a little bit, just with having a more regulated system helps other people regulate when they're around us. but also it's just, hey, I'm not alone, right? Like as soon as we're feeling alone, isolated, disconnected, that's just fuel on the fire of feeling activated and overwhelmed. So it could be maybe just give them a hug, just some gentle, a rub on the back, right? Like sharing space, finding something silly, laughing about something together, right? Like laughter, positive connection. Those things are huge, even if we're not directly talking about the thing. Sometimes we need to talk about the thing, right? But especially if someone's way up here, they're not going to hear, this is not where logic works. Okay. Our brain functions differently when we're up here. And it needs to, that's a survival thing, right? When we're up here, if I'm being chased by a tiger, if I sit down and like, okay, let me like thoughtfully, brainstorm and journal all my options for escaping and survival, right? Like I die, the tiger will catch me, right? Like that's not when you need that. Like when we're up here, it is important, if we're truly being chased by a tiger, it is important that we are impulsive and reactive and we don't think, right? Like that's those things where it's like, oh my God, I don't know how I got out of that, but I made it out of that tiger jungle place, like somehow, I don't even remember what happened, right? So like in true survival things, we need that. But outside of that, that is what, that's what makes us get real reactive. Like if I'm already stressed and then someone's like, hey, I didn't really appreciate how you did whatever, that I'm going to get much more defensive much more quickly, or I might have a much more reactive response, right? And so same with kids, right? Like their ability to think clearly, that access to our frontal lobe, where all of those planning, problem solving, thoughtfully thinking through things. How do I want to handle this? Do I want to do this impulsive thing over here? Or do I maybe want to wait? That starts to shut down the more we're getting up here. So if your kid's up here, I might feel like they're being defiant or just pushing your buttons on purpose. But a lot of it is the way their brain is functioning has changed. There's a book called The Whole Brain Child that I see some of y'all nodding. It's great and has some really great resources for kids on how to support this. But a big one is going to be, we don't need to use logic and reason when they're up here. That's not going to work. Okay. What we need to do is these things. How can I help get them a little closer to this window? They don't even have to be all the way here, right? But even 5% more present is helping that much more of their brain come back online, right? So like one of the examples they give in that Whole Brain Child book is getting down on their level, putting a gentle hand on their back, and just like reflecting the emotion that they're having. Oh, you're feeling really frustrated right now. Yes. Ah, I need water. Ah, right, whatever, right? Okay, we can go get some of that or whatever, right? But like kind of coming down on their level, responding in a way that is reminding them of, hey, you have some positive connection here. You're not alone. Doing a little bit of gentle physical touch. Again, that's going to help them notice something different. Even if you're not like, hey, notice my hand on your back, right? Like they're going to just kind of feel that. And then it's gently allowing them to start to slow down and come back. Right, same with like the body movement and all of that. So with all of that, I'm going to pause and just check in on questions. That was a lot of content real quick, but I just want to see, how's this landing? What questions do you have, and what would feel helpful for us to check in on?
Now or at some point, how do we wrap in the educational system to come around that as well? With teachers and how they can affect the child with verbiage or tone or response or whatnot.
Well, and that's a thing that can vary a lot, right? Because in school, the school's going to have different needs, right? We got to get through certain curriculum for all these sorts of things, and we have X amount of kids in the class, right? That's one thing that can be nicer about smaller schools like this, is sometimes you can have some more flexibility than maybe like at a public school. But I would just say approaching those conversations with teachers and administration with curiosity. And also, like, especially if you get a counselor for your kid or something like that to help them brainstorm some things, because some of the tools might be ones that your kids can try. And again, this will vary depending on their age, right? Like if someone's 5, they're not going to be like, here's my coping skills for today, right? Like, but if someone's older, they can do that a little bit better. So some of the things, depending on the kid and their age, are things they can try on their own, or maybe they have a certain fidget toy or things like that that help them focus or regulate or support themselves in class. And then some of it might be working with the teachers or the admin around some of that, but that just has to be a conversation to figure out what the options are. But if you're not sure of what to even ask for or advocate for, that's where getting a counselor with your kid, they can help, because they can help give you some language and some options for what to ask for and try out and all that sort of thing.
Anxiety.
Well,
Can you repeat the question?
oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, the question was, how do you work with schools? I was thinking I should repeat the question as she was saying it, and then I forgot that thought by the end of it.
I feel like anxiety is just
Yeah.
sports. Every
Yeah. Well, that's how to think holistically about all the factors that impact anxiety. That's a big thing. And one thing I'll say, every kid is different. So just because one kid thrived with a certain kind of schedule and activity list doesn't mean that all of your kids will thrive with that same schedule and activity list. I know I'm a homebody. If I have to go be out doing stuff for like 10 hours a day, like I feel like I'm dying on the inside by the end of the day. Like my system is shot. And I was even like that as a kid. I could do a little bit of extra stuff, but then, man, all I really needed was to like do little craft projects in my room, maybe have one friend over, right? Like, whereas my sister was much more extroverted, liked to do a lot of activities, really liked to be out there. And so her system thrives there. So everyone's nervous system and what their needs are is going to be a little different. So I'd say first, allow your children to be individuals and be curious about what kind of schedule really works for them, right? Because sometimes it might be like they're having high anxiety and maybe not anything is obviously wrong, but it might just be they're doing too much and they don't have enough kind of just downtime, right? Sometimes it can be there's stuff going on at school. It could be friends, could be just navigating more challenging things in class. Sometimes kids will hit that at different developmental points. Maybe they were fine in school until they hit 3rd grade or 6th grade or 9th grade, where there's like a shift in the expectations on them in class, like the amount of holding and external structure the teacher provides changes, more is put on them. So sometimes there's some shifts with that. So again, I'd say just really practicing some curiosity around who they actually are and what actually helps their system thrive. And that can look different from kid to kid. And approaching teachers and school administration with curiosity. Same with approaching your kids, even in how you're thinking about it, instead of like, this is a problem and we need to fix it. Like, hey, how can I be curious about this? What if this anxiety is like a thermometer? It's letting us know something's up, but what might that be? How can we be curious about it instead of just trying to stop it? Right? Because it's letting us know something important. We're just not sure what yet. And so really and curiosity is going to be your best friend, right? Like as soon as we start judging it, putting labels on it, that's like a period at the end of the sentence and it shuts down any further inquiries, questions, all that kind of stuff. But curiosity opens up lots of questions, lots of ways to explore, and helps exploring some of this feel a little bit more doable. Any other questions?
What about
Oh, so the impact of technology on anxiety. I mean, technology is great. It is. It can be. Look, anything that is great can become a problem in excess. Anything. Exercise, healthy eating, alcohol, right? Like the list goes on, right? Like anything in excess can become an issue, or anything, if it's the only thing we're leaning on for support, can become an issue, right? Like we need several things, we need a balance, and we need to be able to interrupt, right? And so some of the screen addiction stuff is real for some people. Sometimes it's just we're kind of activated and we lean into this, and then our impulsivity gets higher because we're kind of, maybe I'm stressed. So instead of actually doing something, or I'm feeling really anxious, instead of actually doing something that helps my system regulate, instead what I'm trying to do is just numb it out and distract myself. So I'm just sitting here, we all do this, right? Like I'm going to sit here and I'm going to doom scroll on my phone for an hour on accident, and like I don't even remember clicking on the app that I'm in, right? The more we're in it, the more it's actually working us up, and then the more impulsivity is getting higher. So then we're like going into more and more and more, even though I'm like, I feel terrible doing this, like I don't, but I can't stop, right? Same happens with our kids, right? So it's like, how can we have some technology? Yeah, but also supporting them and having some balance and some breaks. And maybe they do something different to help themselves kind of come down at the end of the day, shift and regulate, whatever. And they can do this and do technology stuff in a way that's fun, but then also having some limits on it. So where it's not becoming the only thing that helps them regulate or land.
You say technology, are you referring to any screen time, TV, the games that kids play as well?
Yeah, I mean, again, anything, this is true for all of us, anything can become a numb out tool if it's the only thing we lean into. So, but also TV is great sometimes, like screen time is great sometimes. We all can enjoy that, and that's fine. So it's not innately bad. It's just how it's being used, and are they also learning other ways to support themselves in regulating, helping some of this emotion shift, getting some of this excess energy out of their body, all that sort of stuff.
So you're saying don't binge watch?
I'm not making any comments here or there about if we can binge watch shows, but you know, again, every now and then, all that stuff is fine, right? It's just being curious about what's the consistency, what's the frequency, and is it becoming kind of the sole coping thing, or are there other options there as well?
So you mentioned, I think it was like 3 things in reference to helping a child come back down, to be regulated. And I just wanted you to repeat those. I thought
Sure.
it was body movement, current moment, positive connection, or something like that.
Mhm.
Just repeat that.
Sure.
I'm thinking have kids at night with homework, parent stress, kids stress, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You could address that.
Sure. Yeah. So just to repeat the things that can help, gentle body movement, positive social connection, noticing something that's current moment. Like all of those things can be helpful. And then, hey, if there's other stuff that is helpful, great, do it, right? Like this isn't like a one and done list, but those are 3 broad categories that can be really helpful. And then again, being really curious about your kid and what helps their system, about yourself, what helps your system, right? Like again, for me, I know trying to do any sort of like heavy cognitive load type thing is the hardest for me after 7 p.m. at night. Like if I'm going to do something that takes a lot of mental energy, I need to do it before, ideally, my prime time is before noon, right? Whereas other people are night owls, their brain thrives in the evenings, right? So again, everyone's system is different. So being curious with your kids, and again, it might be different from kid to kid, but what helps with homework, for example? Is it, hey, when they come home from school, we kind of do a short break and then roll straight into that where it's done before dinner? Or do they need a little bit of a longer break, whatever, and then we come back and do this at a different time? Right? Like, and again, just kind of it might take some experimenting just to see. And then also for yourself, again, our nervous systems as the adult in the room dramatically impact our kids. Also, side note, fight and flight and freeze, those parts of our nervous system are online when we're born. But the third branch, which is the ability to slowly regulate to a place of being present, that is developed over time. So that's why infants, small children, they have to have a grown-up soothe them. They're basically borrowing the part of that adult's nervous system for soothing because theirs isn't online yet. And as kids get older, it gradually comes online more, but it's not fully there until teen years. Right? So also just knowing too, like my child's ability to regulate themselves, to soothe themselves is not actually fully developed yet. And they're borrowing my system for that. So also for yourself, when you're coming in from work, from school pickup, whatever, what are some things that help you, even if it's just like, oh, we're shaking it out in the bathroom for a second, and then I'm going to come back out, and that helps me, okay, right? Like, but things that help you kind of land and just here. All I need to do right now is just this. I don't need to make the whole dinner plan right now. I don't need to go figure out this thing. I don't know, whatever. Like, how can I just kind of get as much of myself just here? And again, you don't have to be 100%, regulated all the time. That's not possible. Our system will have waves, right? So that's important and needs to be there. But as much as you can support yourself in your own stress and frustration responses, that will always help the kid dynamic. Always. So again, curiosity about yourself, curiosity about your kids. And then I'd also say your family system has a shared nervous system. Right? So it's like, it's not just each of us individually, it's also this group, right? And like, we all know, like when you move or like maybe you're going through a divorce or something, the shared system of the family is going to be much more stressed. And like your baseline is just going to be higher because there's a lot going on. Right? And so like having some permission and empathy for everyone, including yourself, just like, yeah, it's just a harder time. And we're in transition, and some of this is just, our system is holding a lot right now already, and that's okay. So how can we maybe ease up on some of our expectations with other stuff? Or how can we look at ways to shift and support just the whole family system in general? And just being a little bit more present, feeling a little bit more resourced, right? Like reminders of resources and options are really helpful, right? Like being reminded we're not alone, right? We're not isolated, and then being reminded that we have options and choices. Maybe we don't love all the options and choices, but we have them. We're not just stuck in a corner with one thing, right? There's always a third option. It's never just either or. Yeah.
How do you see in like, keep saying middle school because that's where my kids are.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah, hormones make a big difference. Sure, yeah. And it's also, that the hormone piece will really like make some of these waves a little more wavy. Yeah. Yeah. And that's also okay. This is also a time, we don't have to be pleasant all the time. We don't want to be intentionally jerks to people, right? But it's also okay if there's some days where it's harder. And again, even with hormones, I mean, it's frustrating and it's challenging, and man, you could not pay me money to go back to middle school, but I don't think any of us would, right? But that's also a great time to practice some of this, right? Like, hey, yeah, hormones are really over the top, right? Mood is really struggling today. What's helpful? What helps you feel less alone? What helps you feel more connected? What helps your system just kind of slow down and just be here? You know, sometimes we just need a hug. Not every teenager is going to be open to that, but you know, whatever their version of that is.
I feel like having boys, I feel like sometimes when we say hormones, we think of, just girls.
Oh, everyone's changing. Yeah.
Too, and I noticed as my son, who's so laid back, and during his middle school years, all of a sudden we get these outbursts of frustration, so which was not, I didn't expect that from a boy. So I think some parents probably don't know that as well.
Yeah. Boys and girls all will have hormone shifting. So this is, and also just in adolescence, that's where that shift happens. Late elementary, beginning of middle school is that shift of where parent is the primary relationship. It shifts from parent is primary to friends and social group is primary. And that is also a very challenging shift. So you have part of it's the hormonal shift, and part of it is the relational shift of what's primary for who I reference in my life and all that sort of stuff. And there's so many, and all the kids are having this shift happen at the same time. So it just is messy for a little bit, and that's okay. And they're figuring out a bunch of stuff. And this is a great time again. Yeah, there can be outbursts. Sometimes one of my friends, who is also a therapist, says this. She's like, anytime that we are fully ourselves, and fully comfortable being ourselves, we are going to be kind of a lot sometimes. Right? And that's okay. We can give them room to be a lot. We can know that we ourselves are a lot sometimes. And also, what are some tools that can help them move through that wave, right? Like a big emotion wave comes up. Here's this big wave. How can we help them surf the wave instead of trying to stop the wave, control the wave, make the waves not happen? Like, that's pretty futile to try that in the ocean. And it is similar with our human self, right? So no emotion. Yeah, it can impact us on cellular levels if we aren't supporting our nervous system and doing what it needs to do, which includes feeling the emotions.
The generation is
Yeah.
different. Something be like, it's okay to.
Yeah. So some of this also might be you're on a learning curve too, right? Like maybe you haven't given yourself permission to feel certain things or move through certain things. And so trying to help your kid do that can feel uncomfortable. It might bring up some of your own stuff, right? Like nothing like parenting to like bring up all of your own things in a whole different way. And that's okay. Right? There's support for parents too. You don't have to figure all this stuff out by yourself. Again, no emotion's permanent, right? That means the enjoyable emotions change eventually. So like having some of that shift isn't bad. It just means we're alive and we're a living organism and our system shifts. But it also means that the really uncomfortable or challenging emotions also always shift. And so what are things that help us learn to surf those waves? We don't have to be scared of emotions. They're not a threat, right? And so with ourselves and with our kids, helping them, and this is also where if you find a good counselor for your kid or for yourself, they can help with this too, of how do we separate like fear, judgment, whatever those things are from the emotions, where it's like, hey, this can actually just be this. It can be uncomfortable, but I don't have to be scared of the discomfort. It can just be a thing I experience. And when the wave is done, it's done and my system shifts out of it and it's not permanent. None of this is permanent. So, and there's a lot of resources out there. Yeah, well, my favorite one for kids with all of this is going to be that Whole Brain Child, Dan Siegel. And then he also has one called Brainstorm that is about adolescence and about what all the brain changes and hormonal changes happening. And they talk about nervous system stuff in there too. And then There's one that's more trauma specific. So if anyone wants that, like if your kids have experienced something traumatic, there's another one that I'm blanking on the name right now, but I could look it up. That is really helpful with kind of understanding what's going on with your kids if they've experienced something more overtly traumatic or something like that that they're navigating. So, and then again, kind of each kid is going to be different, each family system is going to be different, and that's where getting a good counselor can be really helpful. And if y'all want any resources or references on that, I'm sure the school has some, but you're also welcome to reach out to me. I have my cards up here, so if you want to grab one, you can. And then if you're virtual, you can talk to the school office and they can give you my contact info as well. But I think that's it.